Hello and welcome to another video. In today's video you join us partway through the action as we're trying to get our Wheelhorse 706 somewhere towards being finished. Now, anyone watching that has a YouTube channel will know that trying to do jobs and record them at the same time makes the jobs take quite a while longer, so we're probably going to skim over quite a few things today, and we already have. However, if we kind of go from where we are now, we have this, which is the fender off of our Commando 8, Wheelhorse Commando 8, and a seat from that tractor as well. Now you can see this is much wider than the 706 fender here, which needs some repairs done on it. We're still going to try to use this fender so that it's original to the 706, but this is out here because we want the seat off of it to use for this show, which by the way is less than a week away, and we probably only have one working day in the workshop left to work on this tractor, so got to get our backsides in gear for this. Now we are actually going to fit this to the tractor in a minute, and I'll go through why in a second. But if we talk through the other jobs that we've done, we've put a couple of panels on, that being the belt guard here, all new bolts on that, and we also put this panel on and put like a gear selector pattern on there. Obviously in future that will be a decal once it's repainted, but for now that looks not too bad. We've also put a different exhaust pipe on there so it sits further in. That looks much nicer in my opinion. We've tried to get out, or we've started to get out some of the dents on the bonnet, but that's non-essential, so we've kind of stopped doing that so far. We've ran a new fuel line under there and put an inline filter in it as well. And we've left the fuel on for quite a while and there's no leaks, so we are happy with that. And we've also put the new spring on the clutch pedal on the other side. So the only remaining jobs really is the fender work and the rear axle pin. Now this is in a state where we could test it if we put it back together, so that is where fitting this fender comes in. We're going to plonk the Commando 8 fender on here temporarily, chuck our rear wheels back on here, take it off the bench and see whether this tractor works before we go any further. As you saw from those clips, the tractor was making quite a horrible screeching sound and the engine really wasn't very happy. Now we had at that point one more working day left that we could possibly video on, and we spent that day trying to work out how to make the engine run properly, and we put two different new Chinese carburetors on there and it didn't really make much of a difference. So in the end what we ended up doing was switching a known good carburetor off another working engine onto this one, and this now runs quite nicely actually. And so that was pretty much all of our time used up that we could have done videoing, and then everything else that needed doing on this tractor the cameraman did during the week while I was at school. And you can see now we are the week after Newbie Hall Tractor Fest because we still have our show numbers on there. This is actually the one that should be on the radar, but we put the cable ties and everything on before we went and before we'd seen the program to see what numbers we were, so this should have been 83, but that's all right. I think that was the least of our worries at that point in time, seeing as we'd only just got this ready for that show. But speaking of the show, we'll just spend a couple of minutes talking about that. Newbie Hall Tractor Fest is the biggest tractor show in the UK, and it's the most tractors that I've ever seen in one place. And of course, you've got loads of classic cars, commercials and everything like that as well. And also, you get free entry to the gardens of Newbie Hall as well at the same time. So it's a great event, and we've got a video of that coming out this Wednesday at 7 PM UK time, so check out for that. It is quite a long one because there was so much stuff there. I mean, we were there for 2 days, obviously, because we were exhibiting, and every time you kind of explore a different area, there's always another row of machinery that you haven't seen yet. So there's plenty to see for that video, and we were quite amazed at how much was there. So that's something to look forward to this week. Now, while we were at the show, we had someone come up to us whose face we recognised, but we couldn't quite put a name with the face at first. I think that might have been partly because of the long drive that we'd done the previous night, or because the setting we were in, the tractor show, slightly different to the content on his channel. However, that was Tony from AOP Tony, who was kind enough to bring me a t-shirt with his channel logo on there, and Tony is a very skilled woodworker and metal worker. Now, he hasn't posted in a little while due to having the same problem as us with a crowded workshop, but hopefully Tony will be posting again soon once he's got that sorted. And it was great to talk to Tony for a little while at the show. It's a shame we didn't know he was coming, because we could have arranged for him to possibly take one of our tractors around the ring or something like that. But it was great to see you, Tony, and hopefully we might see you in future again at another show maybe. So that was very nice talking to him, and I have to make sure this goes in my wardrobe now. And the other thing we got from the show is in here, which is a set of decals for our 706, because at some point we're hoping to repaint this, hopefully not in the too distant future. And we've also got some decals for the Wheelhorse Roundup 2025, which of course takes place at Newbie Hall, and you'll see in the video just how many wheel horses were there. And these decals were all made by Restoration Decals here in the UK, which is run by Mark, Ewan and Jake, and they make very high quality decals for all sorts of machinery. They do kind of factory ones like the wheel horse ones, or they do custom work as well, and we've used them a number of times before for things such as our Boland's HT snowplow replica decals and stuff like that. Great quality decals, and also very helpful people. So you can find them at restorationdecals.co.uk or on Facebook. It's very convenient having people that do decals in the UK, although I'm sure they'll also do overseas orders for people in America and so on as well. Now, that was some of the good things from the show. Now we'll talk about a couple of mishaps we had at the show as well. For the Wheelhorse Roundup this year, there was an emphasis on trying to get as many implements on tractors as possible. Now, we only have one Brindley sleeve hitch for a wheel horse, which we fitted to the Raider 9 here, which allowed us to fit our Brindley plough, or one of our Brindley ploughs. We fitted our 8-inch mouldboard one, just because it's lighter, and we were hoping that would work better with the lift cable, which we were proven a bit wrong with that, and we'll come to that in a minute. And on the 706, we have a cultivator which Dad made up in an hour from an old cultivator from a walk behind machine, and you can see that goes into the slot hitch there. Now, if we go have a look at the laptop, there's a picture of what it looked like before we kind of cut it up a bit, which we effectively just lopped this bit off, cut those bits there, and then welded the bars straight on either side, and then just kept 6 tines, which I think there's 6 tines on there, and then a depth tine, which we couldn't really fit on there with its current design. And we'd quite like to see how this does actually, but we think this might be a bit weak at the moment. We probably need some reinforcing bars from kind of either side to this main part, and then it probably needs a lick of decent paint, but this was the best we could do. I think this was the day before we loaded up and headed to the show that Dad made this, so pretty good going for the time that we had. Now, going back to the mishap that we had, which was with the Brindley plough. Now, on the Saturday for the ring display, Dad was towing me. He was on the Ride-a-matic, I was on the 706, and that is because with my age and the fact that I don't have a driver's license yet, I can't drive around the show ring freely because of insurance reasons. So I had to be towed by Dad on the Ride-a-matic, although surprisingly both of our tractors seemed to actually work all right for the 2 days that we were at Newbie Hall. So I kind of had to stay to one side, obviously with the tow rope and the plough still being on the Raider, or the plough being on the Raider for about 2 minutes after we set off, because as we went over a cattle grid into the next field where the show ring was, the plough suddenly dropped, and for about 10 feet we were ploughing up Newbie Hall's very nicely kept lawn, so sorry about that. But I initially thought that the lift cable had snapped, and I was trying to shout to the cameraman to pick the plough up, but obviously you couldn't hear me over the sound of the exhaust and all the other tractors around us, but soon came to a stop and we managed to whip the plough off and hand it to our friend Paul, who was very conveniently taking pictures at that time and offered to take it back to his awning display just so it was out of the way, and he ran a very nice Sysis awning display at Newbie Hall. But yeah, we had that carried away and we didn't hold up the show ring display too much, I don't think. Managed to catch up a bit, and thankfully it wasn't one of the tractors not running that caused the issue, but the issue actually came from our lift cables that we made up, which we'll demonstrate on the Raider here. It's not a very good design, we think now. So if you look there, there's that block on the cable, which effectively got 2 Allen bolts in. Now we did that up as tight as we possibly could, but clearly it wasn't tight enough, because on the Raider-matic that slipped effectively with the weight of the plough until the plough went onto the ground and took the weight off of it. So no matter how much you lifted the lift lever, that wasn't lifting the plough out of the ground at all. Now thankfully it didn't go too deep into the ground, it was only just like the very tip of the moldboard that was going in. But yeah, still not very ideal, and we need to find a different solution for that, clearly. Which, talking to some people at the Wheelhorse Roundup, they were saying that they use these kind of loop parts, which we'll have to see how that works, and they use these with these kind of anchor things. And we think probably the best solution would be if we could find some sort of bolt to go through there with some sort of eye or hole on the other side that we could kind of slip this into and round like so. This is an old Wheelhorse lift cable, we think, off something, not fully sure what. It's been cut at some point, so it's not long enough to use really, but if we could replicate that kind of design, that would also probably work. And we had a question on one of our recent videos from Dell, and I'll link Dell's channel down below, and he was asking us how we make up a lift cable for our wheel horses, because he needs to do something similar. And I think the answer to that is don't copy what we were doing, Dell, because it clearly didn't work when we've got a bit of weight on the back. And I mean, that Brindley 8 isn't even the heaviest of attachments that we could put on the back, so clearly we need to find a better solution, and when we do, we'll let you know. But now, that's pretty much it for the mishaps we had at Newbie Hall. It wasn't much, but a bit of an inconvenience. Now we'll get back to the 706. So let's talk about the big jobs that we had to do on the 706, which I think we said in the last video was the rear axle pin and the rear fender. So if we start with the rear axle pin, Dad made that up on the lathe while I was at school, and from all the tests that we've done using the slot hitch, which isn't much, but they haven't come back with any big issues really. It's done its job so far, so that's pretty good. We're pretty happy with that. And then when it comes to the rear fender, it wasn't quite so simple. Now we've got a few pictures on the laptop that we can kind of go through for this. Didn't get any video unfortunately, but that was quite time consuming. Now this photo here is when we just straightened out the back part of the fender there, and we'd started to clean this up, obviously with the welds that someone had used to mount the previous seat, and also a couple of rust holes like that one that's circled on the fender there. And on this picture you can see just how bad that pitting was in this whole area, and you can see there, that's the rust hole circled as well. However, when we cleaned this up further, we found that most of this corner was actually rotted out, so Dad had to put a whole new corner into that bit of the fender. You can also see some of the holes from the original spot welds where they've pulled through in the past. There was a couple still hanging on, which we used, or we drilled out later. You'll see that in one of the pictures coming up. You can also see the cracks from where a previous owner had just done normal welding to hold the brackets on the underside of the fender as well, and they'd kind of cracked through, which wasn't especially helpful, so that was another thing Dad had to weld up. You can see here, these are the brackets from the underside, which had been cut off at this point. We'd done a load of measuring before we took them off, and then took these off to do some repairs, which that's what the underside of the fender looked like with those off and all cleaned up. You can see all of the spot welds drilled out and everything, and kind of ground down those other welds as well. And this is the setup for kind of putting the bracket back together, because we cut the bar in the middle out and put a new one in, which we'd made up. I think we kind of started making that up in the previous video but didn't get too far with it. Well, that's that all set up, and then we kind of drilled holes in the side there and welded them up effectively so that there wasn't any massive lumps, and it almost looks like spot welding but obviously isn't quite. And this was the first trial fit, I think, where we'd enlarged the spot weld holes and Dad had just welded through them in 4 places to make sure everything lined up on the fender with the brackets and it all sat properly on the chassis. That's a bit more zoomed in on one of the welds, and that appears to be all pictures we got for that fender. Now, we took so much paint and rust off of that fender that really we did have to put some new paint on it, which this is what Dad calls a 20-foot paint job, which is, it looks all right from 20 feet away, but when you get up close you can see that it's really not great. It's definitely not how we would paint a tractor if we were repainting something properly. This was just to kind of cover up the bare metal at the time. Now if I go around to the other side, I can lift the lid on this and you can kind of see the underside with all of the brackets and everything. Looks much cleaner without those horrible welds on either side now, and we whacked some rubber grommets in that we just had spare. Ideally we would put new ones in, which is what we'll do at some point in future. And from those pictures I seem to recall it was this corner, I think, that Dad had to replace, so that actually looks pretty decent now, I would say so. And this definitely did its turn, the paint job, at the show, but in future obviously that is going to need to get replaced. Now the seat on here had a good clean up, and this is the one off of our Commando fender, so this is going to have to go back soon at some point, and we'll have to try and pick up a Commando or 706 seat here in the UK for this. And we're also going to have to try to pick up a set of thin rear wheels that fit 6-12 tyres, because these are off of our red 1962 Ride-a-matic, but we wanted the thin wheels to go with the thinner fender that a 706 had, because that's kind of what makes it unique compared to something like a Commando 7 or a Commando 8 Wheelhorse, the kind of thinner look on the rear end. So we need to get some of those, which is easier said than done here in the UK. We need a number of sets for Boland's Ride-a-matics as well, such as the second 1960 that's on the bench there. So there's still plenty to do on this, but this is kind of a condition that we had it going to Newbie Hall. So with all the progress covered on the 706 today, we've headed inside to show you something that I had made at Newbie Hall, which is here on our bookcase, which is a canvas print of our exhibits at Newbie Hall with our show boards and everything. You'll see that on the Newbie Hall video on Wednesday, and I think that turned out quite nice. As I said, this is on the bookcase in our living room or lounge, whatever you want to call it. Although it appears my mum and sister have put some rubbish in front of it, but you can still see the tractors, so that's okay. But that's it for this video. Make sure to check out that Newbie Hall video going live on Wednesday, and also check out Tony and Dell's channels linked in the description down below. But that's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.